2025. I'm Cynthia Sanderson. I'm the president, and I would like to turn it over to our discussion leader, James, and he can introduce the topic and get this meeting rolling. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. So this is one in a long series of topics. Our club has started doing annual themes of topics over the course of the year. We've done a few different themes in the past. This year is a theme of change, and we've talked a lot of different aspects of change, different ways of managing change, different kinds of change. But today we're going to turn inwards a bit introspectively, and we're going to look at our own selves and how we respond to change internally. We're going to look at the emotional toll of change, the way that we relate to it. And there's a lot to unpack there. If you could say that there's a lot more inside of each person than there is outside of all of us together. So let's explore this theme together. And to that, we're going to connect a little bit, and one of the ways that we do that in our club, in a nice, unique tradition that we have, are our little breakout icebreaker sessions. And to lead that is Mary. If you want to introduce what we're going to do.
Terrific. We call this a warm-up exercise, getting us connected with our theme. And I just want to check, usually we kind of break into breakout rooms. Do we want to do that into two small groups today, or we
Yeah,
could pair
let's
people
do.
up?
We should be able to do pairs of two. Yeah,
Pairs? Perfect. Well,
yeah.
so here is the topic question. We'll pair up people in a minute. And then when we've got, give you about, we're paired about maybe 5 minutes to discuss the topic. And then we'll come back and ask a couple of people if they want to report out. So this topic is, as James said, emotions in motion. So what I'd like to know is, when have you been involved in a change where your reaction to it surprised you? So you might, I will give you a very mini example. I bought a new bed one time and didn't tell my husband. I was so excited. He came home. I didn't say a word. Looked just like it had when he left the house that morning. He got into bed and he's like, "What's wrong? What's going on?" I said, "Oh, I bought a new bed." He's like, "I can't I can't sleep on this." And he slept on the couch for 2 nights before he decided it would be okay. It shocked me. I was hoping for a delight from him, and there he was. So I think it probably surprised him too how strong his reaction was. But then we had to manage through that little bit of a change. Yours don't have to be quite so, dramatically absurd, but think of a time that your own reaction, emotional reaction to a change surprised you. We will put you in the breakout sessions, have a chance to about 5 minutes to talk about it, and then bring you back. Thanks, James.
All righty.
All right. Well, Shanita and I had a delightful conversation. Managed to get in quite a few laughs in there. Luckily at ourselves, which tells me we both have good senses of humor about our own reactions. So let's see. It looks like James had sent me a note saying we will have a discussion about this. Is this because we want to do the
That was in
waterfall?
reference to the workshop part of things.
Oh, the
For the timing.
workshop part thing. Thank you. No worries.
This
Okay,
part
so
goes as per usual.
okay, excellent. So I'm going to give us maybe what we could do is use the chat first of all to just send a note saying what was your surprise reaction? Like, was it delight? Was it shock? Was it sadness? What was the reaction that surprised you? Just name the emotion. And don't be surprised if I call on a couple of people to say, oh, okay, Danny was shocked. Stubbornness, oh, discomfort, shock and disappointment. Okay. So I'm going to give our guests a chance to share a bit. So Danny, tell me about shock.
I even have the illustration right here. I was sharing with Judy that my children went out this last weekend while I was at training and purchased our Christmas tree. And it is about 2 feet tall and it is live. And it is now in my office because I had probably about 30 minutes on Sunday morning discussion with my husband that he didn't really get a word in edgewise about why there was a 2 foot tall tree in my home instead of my Christmas tree that I was looking forward to decorating. So that was
Ah,
my recent surprise. I have to say, though, this tree has been put to good use because I brought it down here for our work virtual Christmas party. And the cat, who used to be an outdoor cat and now is tortured with being indoors, has been so excited that I brought a piece of the outdoors down here that it has been living here all week long, right on my desk. So all was not lost, but it was quite shocking to discover a live 2 foot Christmas tree in place of my normal Christmas tree.
well, yes, there you go. And Chanita, you said discomfort. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was just kind of walking through. I think the discomfort. So my example was in my cleaning routine. I like things a very specific way, and my son often helps me, and he does, several chores, and he helps cook and things here. He's 28, and sometimes he'll do the laundry, and when he folds the towels differently than me. I do like the three fold, and he might just fold it, twice, and so it's really flat, and so. And so I know he's doing a good thing, but sometimes it's like the discomfort sitting in it is like leaving those towels and they're different than my towels and it makes it look not uniform. So that initial discomfort, and then it's like, okay, I'm gonna sometimes go back and refold those towels so that they look how I want them to look. So just that. It's nothing big. And I know it comes from a good place. It's all stuff I need to talk myself through.
Yeah, we talked about how it's nice to know that you know that about yourself, right? And you know that for most of us, like it's the relationships
Yeah.
ultimately that matter. All right, thank you all for participating. That was our topic warm up, and now I am going to turn control of today's meeting back over to our moderator, Toastmaster James. Back to you.
Thank you, Mary. Fantastic. I love those examples so much. It's so great. Little changes can be as impactful as big changes sometimes. It's crazy. The emotional toll of an unexpected dwarf Christmas tree. I love it. All right, next up we're going to have our keynote speaker, Danny Rylander, who has graciously joined us to contribute her expertise to speak on this subject and preface to our workshop. Danny is a licensed mental health counselor associate, and she's also a Toastmaster. I've seen her speak quite a few times, actually. I remember back in contest season, And I loved your stories, all so full of life and like deep life. So good, so good. But she has a mission to help others navigate their own unique journeys through sharing lessons of resilience, hope, and authenticity, learned from her own real life experiences. We're going to have some exchanges of life here. It's going to be beautiful. And her title tonight is Navigating Change, Life Lessons from Grief and Resilience. Please take it away, Danny.
Thank you. It's so good to be here with everyone tonight. As Toastmasters, change is really at the heart of what we do. There are day in and day out, there are clubs just like this with people just like us that are getting together and supporting each other in making the changes that are necessary to achieve their goals, professional, their speaking goals. And we do this exciting process with intention here at Toastmasters. Yet all change, regardless of its nature, has emotional weight to it. Transitions can bring with it uncertainty, loss of what was before, anxiety about the future, a need for emotional recalibration. And this is, again, all types of change. Today, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on one type of change, which is life altering changes, the kind that really reshape our world. In 2015, I faced that type of change. Some of you have heard my story. It was just another ordinary day in the life of a mom with 5 boys. Many of you have heard the sagas. I packed up the kids for school, dropped them off navigated the school drop-off line, and took the little one to daycare, kissed them goodbye. Then I went to work. Then the call came, the call that no parent ever wants to get. He stopped breathing. There's nothing we can do. There's no answers. We're sorry. In that instant, everything that I knew and believed in changed. I share this with you tonight not to pull you all into my big feelings of grief, but I want to illustrate that grief can be a powerful teacher. Other changes that are unexpected and difficult can be powerful teachers that help us build some essential skills to navigate life. As a mental health counselor now, new since the last time I was with this group, I spend a lot of time helping people work through different types of changes. And a lot of the work that we do is building resilience and emotional capacity while people are going through change. We can't always change the circumstances, but those are the things that we can work on. And I often find myself reminding them that hard, difficult, sudden, unwanted changes are really a crucible. They are so heavy and difficult. But they're also the experiences that we can use to see new strengths emerge, to build skills that are necessary for pursuing new opportunities in life, making braver decisions, taking bigger steps, and embracing even unexpected gifts that come to us in our life. I'm going to move us a little bit now from talking about grief as a teacher into the experience of grief, because I believe that the place that we so often get stuck when we're dealing with grief or other big changes is in the uncertainty. That's the barrier where most of us get stuck instead of being able to take and use it as an opportunity. And I believe that if we unpack a little bit about what happens to us when we experience change, especially these deep type of changes, that maybe we can help ourselves not get stuck. So change affects us not just emotionally, but actually at the biological level. We have this really cool system in our body called the parasympathetic nervous system, for all the biological nerds in the room, that is just this powerhouse of processing tens of thousands of pieces of data every millisecond and deciding what to do with them before our brain ever has a thought, a feeling, or makes a decision. But it's kind of like having the most modern CPU for your computer that's programmed to work in a Windows 97 processing or in a Windows 97 setting. Because our nervous system is, as it's so amazing at getting all of this information and figuring out how to shuffle it from place to place, it really does sort these experiences into two simple buckets: predictable, unpredictable. Okay. And what happens, no matter whether the thing is positive or negative, when it plops right into that unpredictable bucket, is our bodies undergo this cycle that includes some measure of these steps: shock, this doesn't feel real, what just happened; disorientation, I'm not really sure how to function in this new reality, or how am I supposed to respond to this; resistance, things just need to go back to normal, or like, not today; adjustment, okay, I see a way I could navigate this; and then finally integration, I'm becoming someone new, I'm handling this challenge, I'm finding a new way to solve this. And we can see how this applies to the small changes that we have, like a flat tire, all the way through the big, deep life changes, which take a little bit longer. But even after we get to that place of integration, becoming new, problem solving through it, building our skills, we still face the next big change or big response that we have to deal with when it comes to change, especially significant changes. And that is an impact to our identity. Even positive changes like a promotion, a new role, etc., can trigger emotions from mild discomfort all the way up to what we know as identity grief, which is a mourning or a grief that has to do with losing the part of us that was safe and secure and in that constant predictable environment. So about 3 years after my son passed away, I had navigated through the stages of grief, which correspond to those biological stages our brain and body go through when we deal with those sudden changes. And I came to the most challenging part of my change journey, which was the part where I realized that I was never going to be able to be the woman that I was before my son passed away. Those of you in the room who have experienced sudden loss or sudden changes or grief, you know what I'm talking about. And you know that experience of how your experience reshaped so much about what you knew about the world around you, right? My loss journey reshaped my sense of safety, how I looked at the world, how I interacted with the world, my capacity, my expectations, my identity, and so many other things, including my voice that I use here at Toastmasters. It also became a blueprint, though, for how I would navigate all of the other multitude of stacked up changes that I would have to navigate in the future to become the me who I was meant to be after that experience. It gave me what my family likes to call our superpowers. So a couple of those: an increased ability to really tolerate uncertainty or discomfort, to be able to sit in discomfort that I couldn't sit in before. It forced me to release a lot of the perfectionism that drove me. And now I can show up in spaces embracing more of the I am who I am, and that's enough. It also helped me really reprioritize relationship and presence over performance in my speaking, in my personal and my professional relationships, which has led to me becoming a more influential leader, mother, and speaker. I think grief also gave me a new pattern to follow, a new rhythm in my body when I start to get that unpredictable alarm going off. And it has helped me kind of shape over time and hone a new way of handling changes that looks a lot less like freak out and a lot more like allowing the physiological changes to happen, accepting, releasing, and realigning things instead of getting stuck. I want to speak for just a minute to those of you who are approaching this holiday season and you have had loss or change or difficult experiences this year or past years, and just take a breath to acknowledge that this is not easy. This is a lot to hold and a lot to carry. I also want to emphasize as we're closing today that, and the message that while change can be daunting and grief can feel really overwhelming, off and on, sometimes out of nowhere, both of those things, the sudden change, the loss of the changes, those are profound teachers in our lives. Every transition, whether it's loss marked by loss and confusion or by excitement and celebration, has the potential to really reshape us, to like to grow our capacities and to really deepen our understanding of who we are and how we want to approach the world around us. So as hard as they are, there's still opportunities. There's still that glimmer of hope in them. Tonight, I've shared a little bit of my own journey through grief and transformation and highlighted some of the ways that it's equipped me and hopefully can equip you with some powerful tools. I've also talked a little bit and debunked a little bit of how these changes really impact us to help keep us from getting stuck when they happen to us and allow us to keep taking the steps to move forward, to get through those biological processes, to know that they're normal, to not get stuck in the uncertainty. And eventually, when it's time to embrace that new us and make all the changes that need to come to help us develop into who we're going to be. And I want to invite you as I close tonight to take some action after this speech, not just for yourself, but also for all of those that you lead and that you mentor and that you influence in your circles. Take a moment to really reflect sometime in the next week about a significant change that you've had in your life and what you learned about yourself during that time. And take a moment to really honor that, the loss and the growth. Then maybe take a little bit to look up a new skill for regulating your emotions when change comes. Practicing methods like deep breathing or mindfulness or journaling, or even finding a support person in your life that really can help you when you come to that emotional change. Embrace your vulnerability and your authenticity. It is okay to not be okay. And it's okay to be okay when things happen. That really reminds me of our topic tonight about surprising ways that we sometimes react to change. Acknowledge it, be authentic, those are okay. And then take the time to remember that there are people all around you that are going through challenging times. And be sure to take a look around and offer your support as well. So let me just leave you with this thought. Change and grief may reshape us, but they never diminish our capacity to lead, to connect, or to make an impact. You're not weakened by the changes that you faced. You are expanded by them. So trust your journey, trust the lessons that they have to offer, embrace who you're becoming, and let your transformed self shine in everything that you do. Thank you.
So powerful, Danny. So powerful. Thank you so much. That was moving for me, particularly since my most recent major loss was our former cat, with our new cat, or one of our new cats, kind of coming around and cuddling me while you're talking about grief. It was actually really special. So thank you for sharing all that. That was powerful. We're going to go into a workshop now as a way of taking action and following on and exploring what Danny just showed us. And workshops are typically very cerebral in a lot of ways. You're tackling a problem, you're analyzing it. This workshop's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a bit more from the heart. So it's going to be a little bit more personal. We are going to be breaking up into breakout rooms, but we're going to use the lens of story to explore how we relate to identity. Story is something that I have been exploring a lot lately, not just in terms of the craft of being a storyteller, not just like a novelist or a writer, but a storyteller in the true old sense of the old bards and the old yayas and babushkas who tell their grandchildren the old tales of the wolves in the forests type of storytelling. The simple storytelling that has endured most throughout time and history. Because the founding thing is that story, in so many ways, not just shapes reality, it is reality. Even our memory, our thoughts are all us just telling ourselves our own story. The way we see and shape the world is all framed within the context of story. And for the history of human race, we've encountered the world and explored it through the lens of story and its patterns. What's fascinating is that folk tales, as a particular category of story, are actually, they're finding, a social tool for therapy. We take these lessons, these bits of wisdom, and you have this old wizened grandma who has all these wisdom, all these lessons learned in life, and she could try and sit down her grandchildren, her great grandchildren, and say, "All right, when this happens, do this, and if this happens, do that." And they're going, grandma, you don't know anything, like we all do, right? Instead, what humans have found works best is to not give advice, but to give the gift of story, to tell a story that captivates the attention and sticks deep. There's so many things in my life where I'll do something and I go, that worked. Why did that work? And I realized I made that choice based off of a shaping that happened to me from a story that I read when I was 5. Right? So many times I'll explore who I am and I'll trace it back to a particular book I read, a particular story I was told. There are stories that my parents read that shaped how they made decisions and how our family was raised, that rippled through. And when I read those same books, I could feel a resonance because it was part of my identity already, even before I read the book. It's fascinating how this works. So cultures wrap up wisdom for life in small but astonishingly deep story patterns. What's fascinating, because humans are just humans all over the place and throughout time, we run into the same problems. And so we explore those problems in very similar ways, which means there are certain story patterns that just resurface. And those particular ways of exploring get enshrined in different details, different ways that different cultures have tried to answer these problems of grief, of loss, of becoming, of growth. All these different questions we all have to deal with. They're the ones that are most deep and important to us. So there are 2 story archetypes that are astonishingly resilient, astonishingly consistent, that have been across every continent, throughout the world, and throughout time. And these are the patterns, are kind of inversions of each other that I want to introduce you to tonight. The Animal Bride and the Feral Child. So the Animal Bride we can see as an example, the Swan Queen stories. We see it often in the Eastern Europe and Russia. If anybody has watched the ballet Swan Lake, that's one of these motifs of the idea of someone being turned into a swan and then trying to be rescued back into being a human. But a lot of the stories are the other way around. There's a Lithuanian folktale of a swan princess who comes down to help an older couple, and they're afraid of losing her because she's, a wild fake creature. They're not sure, they can't really trust her. She's going to go help someone else when they get old, kind of thing. And they steal her wings. She can't fly away. She's stuck with them, helping serve them. And then she's rescued by a king, and then she ends up actually getting captured away, wooed back into the wild by her old lover. Given a feather, turns her back into a swan. She abandons her husband and her son. And then there's a story, this tension of how does the king and the son relate to this? What do they do with this? And there's of course, there's a stepmother who's obviously a witch. All this kind of stuff comes in, and then she's drawn back to being a human, which isn't always how these stories end, out of compassion for her son. to rescue him from the false mother. She stays human, even though that's not her original nature. It's a powerful story. It's a deeply heartbreaking story. It never really resolves the tensions, but it gives a lens through which to explore this question of lost identity. In Africa, it's not just birds. Stars, like star brides, like star women, star maidens come down in these baskets. That's kind of like E.T. or something. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. But Native Americans also have this particular motif. It's kind of crazy. One of my favorites, though, is in the Celtic Isles, in the Western Ireland, in Wales. There's the Selkies. Have you ever heard the tales of the seals and their pelts? And similar to the mermaid tales as well, where the mermaids leave their comb, and then the sailor comes and takes the comb, and they can't go back into the water again, so he captures his bride. Same thing happens with the Selkies with their pelts. They'll leave their pelts on the shore, and the sailor comes. But what's fascinating is that all these themes have this element of an identity tied to leaving behind of one's shape, in the form of one's wings, their pelt, a physical token of some sort. There's this loss and theft, something that you didn't choose, that happens, and it's embodied in a physical way, like Danny was talking about. It's like there's this little motif there that we can reflect on. Also, what's fascinating is that there's this bridge between the wild and the domestic, and this tension of like leaving behind the wildness of the waves and that craving. And then now you have children, and what do you do at home? How do you relate to that? And these themes are all relevant not just to patriarchy or the relationship of men and women, but to any kind of coming of age, whether it's growing up, having kids, losing your singleness. All of these things are all wrapped into this interesting little story pattern. On the other side, as opposed to the coming from the wild to the domestic, there's the other side of things. Sometimes it's the Selkies' son. The Inuits also have a story of an abused blind boy whose mother was evil to him. She wasn't actually an evil stepmother, she was just an evil mother. who was rescued by a loon. He became a bird to escape the home that was evil to him. Also, there's reindeer's children in Finland, which is also one of my heritages. There's stories of reindeer, of course, because reindeer are really big for the Finns. And there's also a reversal sometimes where it's the male husband who's coming to the female to the human female, as opposed to the other pattern, which is really fascinating. There's all these little tweaks and changes to these patterns that are powerful. But there's this being caught between worlds. Often it's the Selkie's son, sometimes it's the son of the reindeer, and they have parentage that are from two different worlds. And like, what do I do? How do I find my way through all of this? But one of my favorite stories from this side, the feral child side, is Mowgli from the Jungle Book. How many of you remember the Jungle Book? Either the animated or if you've read the original. It's amazing. And there's that story of the little child who survives the attack by Shere Khan and his family, wanders into a wolf's den and is adopted by the wolves and is raised in the wild as a child of the wild. But then he encounters his true self, or what he thinks is his true self, in the human village. And he tries to reintegrate and finds out that he doesn't fit. And this question is he of the jungle or is he of the human side? Which is real? Which one is it? And at first, if you read both books, there's also a sequel to the Jungle Book, both answers are true in different ways. And he has to figure out how to reconcile these two sides. In this case, the domestic identity is the beginning, and it fails, leading to an escape into wildness. And there's a wrestling over a total abandonment to the wildness, or treating it as a temporary respite to refine your way back into domesticity. So these two sides I want to explore. I want to explore it personally. So we're going to break up into breakout rooms. And I'm going to give us 10 minutes in these breakout rooms. I'm going to remake our rooms here. Make sure I don't have someone stuck in a room with my recording device. And what we're going to do is we're going to explore some questions. We're going to explore how you've related to change in the past. Do you tend to leave behind the turmoil of the unknown, the security of the known, the wild to domesticity side of things? Or do you distrust tame structures and pursue the unknown, this constant variety, going from the domesticity to the wild? Where do you find your safety? And what shapes in these story patterns that I brought up of identity changes speak the most to you? Where do you find yourself in these different pieces of things? And then lastly, most importantly, because we'll have 10 minutes and there's only so much time to work through these things, you work through these for the rest of your life. If you're going to tell your story in these terms, how would you tell it? You're not going to have your whole story in 10 minutes, but maybe a few nuggets, a few ideas, a few snippets of what this might look like for you. So we're going to break up into rooms, and we are going to explore this for 10 minutes, and we're going to come back out, and then we will explore what we come up with and chat around it a little bit. So far, so good. I'll put the notes.
No,
in,
I'm not clear. What am I supposed to do in the breakout room?
There will be 2 people per breakout room, and you'll be discussing how you relate to change in the past in terms of these stories. So I'll be putting this in chat, the prompts for y'all. There's the notes there. Do you tend to leave behind the solid for the abstract? It's one way of looking at it. Or like Danny talked about, the differences between the predictable and the unpredictable, right? The way our body relates to these. Do you distrust the solidity and try and go towards the wild side of things? But then what story patterns, when I've talked about, resonate with you? And then how would you tell your own story of change? If you're going to make a folk tale about it, a story tale about it. And you can work together on it. You can have one person focus on their life, the person help them work through it, or you can work on it together, however you guys want to find that workout. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, and we'll come back out and we'll explore our results on the other side.
Hello.
Hello. I was loving your talk and how I had all these things lined up and like motifs to try and pull out. I was like, oh, like here's touching on all of them. It's worked out perfectly. This is going to be challenging for a few people though who haven't worked with this kind of stuff. So it's kind of a risk to do this in this format. We'll see how it goes.
I love it though. It's creative. I do love it.
Yeah. I was wrestling with whether I was going to go this particular route for a while, but I've just been, I just kept being pulled back into it, and I kept encountering more stories of this type, and they keep speaking to me so deeply. Like I can't not share it. So
yes, no, I love it. I love what you shared, and I think that it's. I'm thinking about like as I do therapy, I use a lot of creative processes to get us out of our logical brain when we're dealing with hard things. It's better to be out of our logical brain and more into our base instincts to process things. So
it's more suited to the chat for sure.
Exactly. Very safe way to think about the topic changing.
Yeah, it's on the one hand, it's like kind of at arm's length. You're working with the kind of story out here, but it's also like incredibly intimate at the same time. It kind of bridges both those realms really fascinatingly. Yeah, really powerful.
Yes. Oh goodness.
The thing that's for me is that this is kind of a question that I've personally wrestled with a lot because I actually don't know the answer to it. Because I kind of go back and forth between I'm still like caught in the middle. I feel a lot like Mowgli in the middle of his arc. Like I don't know which side I fit more in with. They're like the entrepreneurial, like craving constant change and newness, but also like I just get exhausted and I want to find like a home and belonging and just people around me that I know me, I'm safe with, and just kind of stick with that, you know. And it's basically kind of impossible to have both in so many ways in a full sense. And so like constantly shifting back and forth, I do feel caught in the middle in a lot of ways. So I mean, that's one reason why this particular story type speaks so much to me, because they don't really resolve, really.
Right. There's still there's still a sorry, my brain just lost the words. Um, was about what you said about them not being resolved. Like there's still an aspect of
Mm.
it that's never quite satisfied, right? I think it's like the yin and
Yeah,
yang
yeah.
of it. And I think as I
Hmm.
was listening to you speak and listening to your thoughts about the stories, I feel very much the same way. And I think
Mm.
tying it into kind of my talking about the nervous system and the way that our brains and our
Yeah.
nervous system tend to work biologically, I think that's very much true because our systems are designed to want safety and predictable and to find
Yeah.
ways to put things into patterns so
We
that it
would
doesn't
have died out as a species a long time ago otherwise.
right, right. And then to be able to like discriminate what it thinks is different as threats. But
Right.
yet, I think as somebody who's neurodivergent, like who has ADHD,
Mhm.
and then just again has that kind of spark of liking um, new things and trying new things, there
Mhm.
definitely is that part of me from my soul that really wants to kind of push through some of those norms and push myself out of my comfort zone and seek
Mhm.
new and novel experiences. And so I definitely feel that kind of like push pull. And
Yep.
I think that one thing that I am considering is how prior to my son passing away and going through that big life change, I tended to be a lot more on the novel side, I think. And now
Mm.
I wouldn't say that I've gone really far towards the safety and security, but I would say it's
Mhm.
definitely more balance for me. I feel like I've
Mm. Mhm.
embraced more the both, the both and
Because
need
you
here.
kind of survived the worst of both, maybe sort of, and so that maybe there's less fear involved.
Yeah, it definitely could be. And also I think the ability to stop and honor the parts of
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
right? Because
I
you
love
believe
that you I love you brought it up that way. Absolutely.
yeah. And I think about the story, like even the swan, right? That was really meaningful to me, that imagery, because you have a character that is so, especially the swan mother, um, who is so torn between two different worlds,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And has love and grief and all of the things in both places. So whichever way she went,
Hmm.
there would still be difficulty and there would be joy, but she can't
Yeah.
have both at the
Yeah.
same time, no matter
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
way. And that felt
Yeah.
really familiar to me, that type
Hmm.
of situation where I embrace that I'm both, right? I still have, I don't
Hmm.
believe after a loss that I have that there's complete healing, putting yourself back together again. It's just a reality of
No, it's
embracing.
a yeah, it's a tacit thing. Like we think in binary terms of on or off, done, undone, and like everything has to be tied up in a bow. It's a very modernist way of looking at things when this is a very analog process. It's like a give and take, a feedback loop of just shaping and working and just kind of it's just part of the shaping of things as you go, right? Like this endless journey. It's just part of the flow. Rivers are never done.
No, exactly,
You know?
exactly, exactly. And no matter how like entrepreneurial or how
Mhm.
much we enjoy novelty, I think there's always part of us that still has to come to those places in our life where we get pushed into the change
Yeah,
unwilling. So no
yeah.
matter how much people are embracing change, there's still always those places where we dig our heels in and say,
Right. Yeah.
oh, and sometimes we come to a place where you kind of have to get that forceful push.
Push into it. Yeah. I think thinking through like the different archetypes that I've been exploring lately, the ones that I resonate the most with in terms of this, I think one of the patterns that fits what we're talking about, I don't know if it's the best, but I'm also for some reason I'm thinking of like salmon as well, which has this recursive loop with the endless river, endless journey kind of thing, with the rebirth, and death. And in that death and rebirth pattern, it's like the most classic, most popular, most recognized as the phoenix, obviously,
Mhm.
which interesting is not actually like anthropologically related to the Firebird, which is in the Russian, but they've merged those stories so well together in our collective consciousness that I think in many ways they are a very similar story. There's a solitariness to both of them. And there's this beauty and remoteness to both of them that inspires others, like as a community in its inspiration. Um, but one is like the quest object, and one is this endless journey. So one is kind of like the terminus versus the loop. There's a difference there, right? But the phoenix is something that I've resonated a lot with. Actually, my nonprofit symbol is that of the phoenix. But that idea of constant death and rebirth, like the phoenix doesn't have a mate, right? It does something. It burns itself out, right? As a burnout prevention, because like that resonates a lot with me, right? It's like a self-sacrifice, self-giving. Like you do what's necessary, even if it's not healthy for you, for what is good and honorable, right? You kind of push yourself past the limits. In some cases, it's not always the best thing to do. You need to be able to sustain and maintain, right? There's certain situations where it is what it is called for. You don't have a choice, and like health is robbed from you, and so you have to do what's right regardless. And you result in burning out, and you turn to ash, and you go into this wintry period. This is seasons of life, right? But then there's always that endless hope, right? Because in that ash is the fuel for the next generation, the next rebirth of yourself. And you're incorporating those previous elements back into it. You're never leaving them entirely behind. Like you're not just completely wiping the slate clean. You're reintegrating back in. You're born of the ashes, right? And so this idea of the constant journey in between worlds, right? There's less of the in between worldness bit. I think the Firebird has a bit more of that element of like the cop between heaven and earth kind of an idea, because it's always in a tree, you know. But the Phoenix definitely has that idea of the endless journey and endless becoming. And I definitely resonate with that. And if you're endlessly becoming, there's endless loss. So you're never landing on either the wild or the domestic. I don't even know whether the burning in the ashes or the flowering is the wild or the domestic. I don't even know which is which in some ways. You know, maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but something to think about.
Yeah, no, I really love that. Exactly. Because both of them can be either, just depending, right? But there's part of our dreams that's like outside of the interpretation of like the meaning that we just decide to place on it in that moment. It's so much more.
Yeah. It's something that it's like a well that you're constantly drawing from. You know? I'm muted. I was saying, Danny and I got paired up. We had a delightful conversation about this. And I know that this is a modality that is new to me. It's something I'm learning more about. It's not new at all. It's like it's older than anything else, but it can be difficult and challenging. So if you didn't get anything, that's okay. We will work through what we did come up with. This is like a new way of exploring things. So what I'm going to start off with is a chatterful. We have looks around 12 minutes by my clock for our discussion period. So we'll start the first couple minutes with a chatterful. So if you'll put a few takeaways of thoughts that came to mind or motifs that were relevant to you, whatever was most significant to you, put it in chat. Don't hit enter yet. Just type them in and like raise your hand whenever you have typed it in, and then we'll hit enter at the same time. So we're not cross-contaminating our ideation.
Could you repeat that again? What you want us to put in? A couple of words related to what?
Any significant takeaways or thoughts that you really particularly want to focus on in the discussion.
Okay. All right.
Fine. Let's see. Mine. Cynthia's done. Judy and Mary pop theirs in. So I'm going to hit mine in there. Go ahead and hit enter with what you've got. And then, so Judy says sometimes she's willing to go into the wild, sometimes she's not. Mary says she realizes she sticks to the tame structures until she trusts herself enough to maintain some control. You're bringing some of the tameness with you as taming yourself enough to venture into it. I like that's fascinating. Something that Danny talked about was kind of being caught between two worlds and never having the full resolution. And about the motif of the phoenix, with that endless journey of loss and rebirth, reintegrating the previous into the new, without actually really a final resolution. So the phoenix is immortal because it never lands, it never ends. The ambiguity about it. Cynthia says they're both comfortable with being domestic and not the wild. And her story would be the publisher's clearinghouse, and her story would be Cinderella. Ooh, yeah, Cinderella is a fascinating story, and also incredibly consistent across cultures. Like it's a deep story that's all over the freaking place. So many versions of that story. And Danny said that her journeys are a dichotomy of biological need for predictable and inherent curiosity and bent towards growth. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, because if we didn't have a natural bias towards what's predictable and sane, and our species would have died out a long time ago. It is objectively safer, right? But also we would have stagnated, and if we went all that way without any burst for newness, we would have no stories, we would have no art, we would have also died out in so many other ways. We wouldn't have been able to adapt to different challenges in the environment. So our society as a whole, our species as a whole, has this tension as well between these two, which is why it's so universal, I think, and why the story props up in so many different ways. And Shanita says she thought of the sturdy shapes like squares and rectangles, and those shapes seem more dependable and reliable. I love the artistic way of the symbolic of exploring that nicely. She says she tends to steer clear from uncertain situations that would include shapes. Interesting. It's like kind of like amorphous blobs, so to speak. It's funny. There's a random side tangent, but when I go into conference rooms, there's like this particular kind of decor that's in most conferences, particularly in like hotels. There are these abstract, swirly shapes that mean nothing. They say nothing, right? Because you could have any kind of event in there from anybody. So you need to be able to kind of be congruent with basically anything. It just gets artistically reduced to the lowest common denominator of blah, is kind of the way I put it. It is a void of meaning. And it drives me nuts. They say something. Even if I disagree with it, say it.
100% agreed.
Yeah, I love that. So thank you for bringing that up. I love that. All right, so we have a few minutes here, and I would like to explore this. Did anybody get any commonalities, like out of your discussions, any struggles with recognizing a clear pattern or a clear way of landing? Who struggled with this one? And Danny and I have kind of thought through this in these terms a lot already because we kind of work in a similar space.
James,
Judy and I struggled with it, I'm thinking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Would you repeat the question, James?
Yeah. What parts of this did you struggle with? And we can work through a little bit, possibly.
Parts did we
So Mary and Judy said you struggled with this a little bit. You got some progress through here. But what kind of pieces what would you like to kind of mull over a little bit further, possibly with the rest of us to help out?
Well, if I was to write it as a story, I'm not sure. It felt like, I don't know. I wanted to stick with the known. So it was definitely like the image of sticking into the wild, like the uncertainty, the wildness felt way too uncertain. But even coming up with, are you asking for like a reaction to change that's a pattern in our lives, or
what
we do with that? Yeah.
I don't, there's some interesting story. A story is popping into my head of kind of the motif of like the village, and there's a lot of times the NPCs, so to speak, like the ones who are on the edges of the stories, because stories are always about the interesting people who do exciting, crazy stuff and break all the patterns, right? And then you have the mother or the father sitting there trying to tell their youngest daughter not to go off and marry the beast in the forest. There's the people in the village who are there trying to hold on to the pattern of things, trying to hold on to the reliability that creates that tension in the first place. I think that is actually like a part of an important part of our identity, is having that the walls around the village, so to speak, that keep the chaos out a little bit,
So,
and embodying that is important too.
so James, I guess my struggle a little bit is sometimes the stories, it feels like the heroes and the heroines are the they are more proactive. And I
Mm,
feel like my reaction to change is very reactive. Like I would not be choosing to
mhm.
change. So
Yes,
I have to think about how,
yes.
like what?
You
Yeah.
know, that actually ties in with the Lithuanian one a lot. Go ahead. I was thinking about because I know Danny brought that up. You resonate a lot with the Swan Queen um, in connection with that particular element. Would you like to speak on that, Danny?
If I can find my mute button. Yeah, no,
Yes,
I
go
really
for it.
did. I really did relate to that. I was thinking about this current conversation, Mary, and what you're saying, and the dichotomy here of I don't know if any of you have seen the movie The Croods, right? Where you have the dad who wants to
Oh,
stay in the cave and be safe, and you
yes.
have the other character who wants to bring everyone out into the wild and to experience. And I'm just thinking about how some of us in this
Yeah.
room are more like the dad, and they just they're, and that's okay. I mean, obviously there's
Yeah.
elements of this that don't apply here, but and those are both okay, right? It's okay to be a little bit more resistant to the change, and it's okay to be the
Hmm.
one that the pioneer that wants to go out and sometimes has to pull others and vice versa, sometimes has to stay safe. So what you were
Yeah.
what you were saying was making me think about that. But I agree. I very much related to the swan in the Lithuanian tale who was really torn between two worlds. And whichever way she chose, there was still loss and joy, right? To either be with her son in a human body, there was still a loss of her nature, or to be in nature with her, um, with who she
Family. Yeah.
truly was, meant a loss, another deep loss. And so it's really relating to that type of dichotomy, I guess, in my own life of
Mhm.
um, learning
Ah,
to
yeah.
embrace both of those things in every circumstance. So,
Yeah. And I think that which is I've heard people critique when I've told the Lithuanian tale in full, which is a much longer tale. I didn't have time to give the full version of it here. Um, and people love one of the complaints of that is that the main character, so to speak, is actually feels very passive. Um, because like this happens to her and then that happens to her, and she's just kind of like bouncing back and forth between all these people doing stuff with her without her really being able to do anything about them. But I think that actually reflects a lot of how we feel in life. Like, I don't choose all these chaotic things that happen to us. How do I relate to it? Is my question that I have to actually grip with, you know? So one reason why I like that one a lot. The other thing that comes to mind is that a lot of the story motifs that we tend to connect with, like the Croods, right? It's a blockbuster film. It's something that's very popular in modern American cinema, right? The overarching story that we have in America, because America's founded by people with ADHD, right? They just got really bored with Europe and just ran away. That's one of the simplistic way of looking at it. And it's always the people, the pioneers, pushing out, doing all kinds of crazy things, starting creating an entirely new form of government, rebelling against the king, reinventing everything. That's just kind of been our identity. The cowboy is like our icon, right? The Lone Ranger just does crazy stuff just for the fun of it. And so our stories are all about leaving home, right? Going off into the wild. Um, and it's really, really hard to tell the other story about someone coming home and finding that it's safe. We don't have that many of those stories, you know. And I think that our society struggles with that aspect of it. I think that just the idea of a conservative group, um, it tends to be very stagnant, but we don't know how to healthfully relate, regardless of the political side. I'm not talking about politics. I'm just talking about the emotional relationship of conserving, having giants to build shoulders, stand up on the shoulders of, right? It's hard to do that healthfully because we don't have stories to relate to that side of things very well. And I think without resolution, we can't really resolve all the world's problems in 15 minutes of discussion. But That's something I think would be good for us. I think I'm going to do is like looking for stories about coming home, um, finding that stability that we need in our society to connect to more effectively, possibly. It'd be good for all of us to explore those stories a lot. With that, I'm going to thank you all for your participation. That's some really amazing discussion. I hope that it carries some kernels for meditation and thought. And I'm going to turn this over to Cynthia for our tonight's takeaways session. Take it away, Cynthia.
Okay, what takeaways is everybody comes up with what they learned, something they're gonna think about, or what they really liked about the meeting, and that. So we're gonna go around the room and everybody's gonna give their takeaway. I'm gonna start with you, James, so you can show an example.
One thing that I love about Sun Advice meetings is that whether you're running the meeting or attending the meeting, you always come away with stuff. You always learn something. I'm really glad that Danny made it. But this is something that I've been studying. So I don't know that anything was like particularly like informationally new, but every single person's life is a new thing, and your particular story, the particular way you particularly relate to it, and it brought to surface so much of the correspondence between what we're studying, like modern therapeutic practice and the science behind things, and how they resonate so strongly with these really ancient ways of looking at the world. We just keep finding like this just it just works. However you look at it, whatever lens, these things just work and just work this way. So that was like really encouraging actually to me and really beautiful to see that jiving together of that. So thank you, Danny, for coming and for your talk. It's awesome. So that was my major takeaway was seeing that amazing congruence. Really beautiful.
All right, Danny, do you have a takeaway?
Well, just jumping right in there, Cynthia. Oh, I have so many thoughts and takeaways. I think that I really appreciate it, and something that I am going to spend some time journaling on specifically is this idea of symbolism and archetype and how that relates to the way that I am exploring um, who I'm becoming right now. I have had, I graduated from grad school early this year. I have a new professional identity. There was a lot of life changes. My oldest son graduated and moved overseas, and just lots of things happened during this transition from graduate student to emerging professional in a new field. And I really am at another one of those places where I'm kind of exploring, okay, who am I now here? And so, James, I felt like that was a really helpful way and creative way for me to um, play around with that. I've been a little stuck lately, so I'm really looking forward to taking that exercise into my journal and maybe my art journal and doing some exploration and seeing where it takes me. So, hats off. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Judy, what are your takeaways?
Um, one that I'll give was Danny's point that change affects us physically in our parasympathetic system. And also her point that our journeys are a dichotomy of the biological need for predictable and inherent, between the need for the predictable and our inherent curiosity and bent toward growth.
Thank you. Mary?
I have three, and I'll keep them kind of brief, but I'd like to share them all.
Okay.
I loved the concept that change doesn't diminish who we are. It just opens something else up. And I think that's a little jewel that I have to remember, that I am not diminished by the change. And I can, in fact, the opposite of being diminished, I can emerge stronger. Because sometimes it doesn't feel like that. The second piece of it was, Danny, I loved your point that um, you had to adopt a new identity, and that was like at some point like the deepest, hardest, maybe the hardest level or the last level of just to address over the loss of your son. And I thought, that's my husband died 3 years ago, and I thought that's what I've like in the last year that's really become to the forefront for me. It wasn't like now I've done all the stuff, the tasks, the safe stuff. Now I'm like into the wild. Like, what does that mean? I'm no longer this. This is a new identity I'm forging. So I appreciated that. And then James, I have to say, I've always struggled with the point of the stories, of the points of stories. Like somehow I feel like in literature class, I missed that lesson. Like, what's the point? So when someone says, what's the point of Aesop's fables or any of those tales? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have to, do I have to really think that hard? So tonight, you helped me see, oh, I see how that relate. Oh, I see it's this and this. So, I appreciate that because now I have 7 and 9-year-old granddaughters and we're doing a lot of stories. So I went to like, oh, the Little Mermaid. Oh, I see what that could be about. And oh, this one. So thank you for that. That was one of my great takeaways. Back.
Thank you, Mary. Janita?
Yeah, thank you all for having me. And Danny, thank you for inviting me. And your story always a good opportunity to get to know a little bit more about you. Though I knew those things, the level of vulnerability you showed is just unmatched. So I think for me, I'm taking away that to Mary's point, um, loss doesn't mean less than. You can turn it into a growth pain, if you will, an opportunity for evolving. I agree with Danny. Some things happen to you and you are just not that same person. That doesn't mean you're less of a person or it doesn't have to be looked at in a negative aspect. I think sometimes you have those experiences, and ultimately, there are opportunities to connect on a human level with other folks that have those similar experiences, and from that, you're able to tell stories and help folks through different parts of the grieving process, as well. And those are all gifts. So, like, I think that, and I think those are my takeaways. And then it's not bad to lean into the uncertainty sometimes. I'm very comfortable in very like expected, predictable situations. But in talking to Cynthia, like I may not win the lottery if I do that, or I may not become Cinderella, have a rags to riches story unless someone comes to my door, and that's not to be expected. So it's okay to lean into uncertainty sometimes.
Thank you. And for my takeaway, I really enjoyed the breakout groups, and I never thought of writing my own story as like a fable. And I think I'm going to explore that in journaling. This is not enough time to do that. But I think that would be kind of cool. So, with takeaways, I think I turn it back to James, or is it to me still?
I'll take it back and then I'll hand it off for Janet later after some final comments then. First off, congratulations. This is a really different way of exploring stuff. Talking about how our society weighs things. We're very left brain heavy in our society over the last 500 years. And we have lost touch. Like Mary's talking about, you study these stories in school, they come out from a very left brain, very, spreadsheet type approach. And it can be very difficult to grapple with. But when you look at it from a symbolic, more intuitive side of like, this is like this and this is like that, you're able to bring out more of the personal side of it and it's easier to connect with. But we don't teach it that way. And that's one of the things that we've lost sight of a lot of ways. And I've been trying to learn how to reconnect with that myself. And it is very difficult. I mean, I'm an engineer and a son of an engineer, right? A programmer and a son of a programmer, right? And so being able to reconnect to these has been really interesting and trying to liberating in a lot of ways. And so this is a challenging way of doing a workshop, but you guys did an amazing job. Well done. I appreciate you coming and being vulnerable, thinking with the right side of your heart, so to speak. And as a final action item or takeaway or something to play with in your journaling or exploration if you feel so inclined. A thought that came to mind of a story that explores all our collection of stories, explores this whole theme of wildness and the homeness of change, changing of identities, and of coming home and finding belonging is The Wind in the Willows. If you've ever read The Wind in the Willows, like the actual original book, if you haven't read it, please do. If you have read it, reread it. I need to put it back on my list to reread through. The idea of these little domestic animals who are wild, right? Naturally, they have these little burrows with, a China tea set and having, sandwiches on the shore of the bank of the river and everything, going through the wild wood and then finding the badger and having tea with him in his burrow. And there's always these points of finding home and stability in the midst of chaos. And then these elements of that call, there's this one of the most beautiful, heartbreaking chapters I've ever read in a story is in The Wind in the Willows, when they encounter Pan, that wildness, that sense of loss, and they can't quite reach that supreme wildness of nature, and then going back home and finding comfort in a little dinner together with friends. So there's a beautiful, beautiful set way of exploring this whole theme in The Wind of the Willows. So I highly recommend that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Judy for our general evaluation.
Thank you very much, James. And thank you very much, all Sound Advice members and our guests. This was a good meeting in many respects. I know that James worked hard to find us a keynoter in time, and I'm very glad he found Danny. That I liked your speech very much.
I appreciate the help with finding.
It was well organized and well delivered, and there was a good call to action at the end of it. As of this afternoon, 2 roles were not filled. So as a club, we could do better in filling roles. But Cynthia did takeaways. Mary offered to do timers, so those were filled pretty quickly. James, your introduction of the topic you put in the context of what we've been doing as a club this year, I thought that was good. And you said what we would do tonight, which was good. Mary gave a good explanation of the warm-up question and a good question and called on the guests to speak about it. And we have followed the agenda on time. There were only 2 notes I made. Let's see. Let's make sure that I haven't missed anything. Takeaways were well done and on time. There were only 2 notes I made that we can consider for improvement. And one I've already mentioned, that the club members could fill the roles in more quickly. And we could maybe get a reminder even sooner. For me, James, the introduction to the workshop was difficult. I must be very left-brained, but speaking very candidly, what I really needed as an introduction to a workshop was for you to tell us what you told us, or tell us what you're going to tell us what you told us. I noticed on the agenda, the introduction to the workshop was to be 5 minutes, and it was 9 minutes, what's significant about that is I did not know. Now, in 9 minutes, if a person speaks at 150 words a minute, which we usually do, that's 1,350 words. I knew I didn't have to remember and grasp all those 1,350 words, but I didn't know which ones. It was, speaking really candidly, as beautiful as those stories were, it was hard to listen because I thought, what do I really need to know? And what can I let go of? Because I knew I wasn't going to remember it all. So that would help me to maybe give a more left-brained introduction. It wouldn't be quite as beautiful, but it would help me to understand. I thought, am I supposed to write a story? As I think Cynthia pointed out, that would be a really good exercise, but I didn't figure I could do that in the 10 minutes. with someone or how we were going to do that. So it would be really helpful to have it really crisp and clear what we're going to do. So those are the things to consider. We've done a very good job with the meeting, and I'm hoping we can get more of our members to come and guests to come. I think December may be a difficult month. It gets really busy for people in the holiday season, but more people should have heard Danny's excellent speech and gone through our very helpful workout. And with that, I will call on the timer, Mary.
Thank you, Madam General Evaluator. Let me get rid of this. Okay, so timing wise, Danny, you were so well organized and so well prepared. You had 10 to 15 minutes. You spoke for 13 minutes, 30 seconds. Well done. The only other thing I needed to time was Judy, and you were well within time as your general evaluation. And the rest of it, James managed the time beautifully, so we are right on time. Back to you, Madam General Evaluator.
Thank you very much, Mary. I think I turn it over at this point to Cynthia, our president, for the business portion of the meeting.